Hey everyone, I'm Chris Luzniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the Debate Math Podcast.
Debating Mathy Topics and Mathy Pedagogy with Mathy people just like you.
Let's get into this month's debate. We are looking forward to a great debate today.
We've heard the question of the relevance of high school math come up in both our podcast and many conversations with other educators.
Do our students need high school math? Is it important to their future careers? What topics should we emphasize or focus on?
And we thought this would be a great topic to debate with some guests who are not math educators. So today we have two teams of two debating the resolution. High school math is relevant to our lives after high school.
So here debating that high school math is relevant to our lives after high school, we have two wonderful professionals. First up is electrical engineer and hobbyist woodworker who will be teaching aeronautical engineering after completing his master's degree, Alex Laudadio. Hi, Alex.
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here.
Can you tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
So I'm currently in Dayton, Ohio, getting my master's degree in aeronautical engineering. And after that, I will be teaching aeronautical engineering at the United States Air Force Academy.
And arguing along with him is a queer first-generation Latina public school educator who is currently pursuing a master's in literacy, enjoys playing classical guitar, singing in her community concert choir, and struggles to remember any sequence of numbers that exceeds 5 digits. It's Emily Weaver. Hi, Emily.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Can you let us know where you are and what your current role is?
Yes, I live in northern Pennsylvania, and my current role is I'm a 10th grade and 12th grade English teacher.
Well, welcome both of you. And now the question we want to ask all of our guests is, when did math first become controversial to you? And I'll start with you, Alex. When did math first become controversial to you?
I believe it was when I had to prove that a triangle was a triangle in trigonometry.
Can you say more? What did that even mean?
Just the idea of doing like geometric proofs and like seeing a shape, but then having to prove that the shape has the values that you can see with your eyes. I struggled with that a lot.
Okay. All right. And Emily, when did math first become controversial to you?
So I can remember the year pretty clearly, or I can remember what year it happened. It was the year that I was in 8th grade. Essentially, because I was placed in advanced classes. So I was scoring advanced in English and social studies and science. I had no choice but to go into an advanced math. And I actually would have greatly benefited from a more basic level math because it was just an area that I have consistently struggled in throughout my life. So I remember that being a year of a lot of anxiety, a lot of staying after school late, going to school early, trying to get ahead.
Okay, thank you both for sharing.
Now we have a team of two arguing against the resolution, arguing that high school math is not relevant to our lives after high school. First up, we have best-selling author, educational strategist, and creator of Nellie Loves to Write, a company that provides resources to educators both inside and outside the classroom, Chanel Cunningham. Hi, Chanel.
Hi.
Tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and my current role is a transitional strategist. And so I help teachers use their transferable skill sets to segue into more fulfilling options.
Awesome. And arguing along with her is a reading teacher and a graduate student who is currently at work on her master's degree in educational technology, and an avid hiker who has hiked all of the Grand Canyon and throughout Yosemite, Megan Mungus. Hi, Megan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Can you let us know where you are and what your current role is?
Yeah, I'm currently based in Los Angeles County, more specifically West Covina, a town that nobody ever heard of. And I am a first-year reading teacher at a TK through 6th grade elementary school. And I'm also getting my master's degree in educational technology.
Wow, fantastic. And now we're going to ask both you the question that we ask all of our guests. And we'll start with you, Chanel. When did math first become controversial to you?
That's a good question. I would say it first became controversial when I was in high school. When I first started, ninth grade math, and I went through ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and saw a huge commonality that I never used it outside of the classroom. I would learn these things like solving for X and the square root and formulas for algebra. And it occurred to me that, I never saw this stuff except for in my textbook. And so, it just really occurred to me that, yeah, this is not going to be relevant to me because it wasn't relevant to me in high school. And then now that I'm out of high school, still not relevant.
All right, thank you. And Megan, when did math first become controversial to you?
Well, to be completely honest, math always made me feel stupid. I was one of those kids, I wanted to get A's, 100% on everything. Everything came pretty easy to me except for math. So I remember being about in 4th grade and we were learning something, I don't even know what concept it was, and just thinking, when am I ever going to use this? And I would just get frustrated and upset that I wasn't, scoring as well on tests as I wanted to, and as I did in other grades and in other classes. And then I remember, when I was younger, math was all about rote memorization, multiplication tables, memorizing formulas. And even if I got the answer correct, if I didn't do it the way I was taught in class, I wouldn't get points for it. So that really kind of ignited my struggle with math.
Thank you both for sharing. And with that, let's get into the debate. All right, we begin with opening statements from each of our speakers. You each have 2 minutes to present your opening arguments. And we're starting with the side arguing for the resolution that high school math is relevant to our lives after high school. And first up is Alex Laudadio. Alex, you're up and your time begins now.
So we are here today to discuss the resolution, is high school math relevant to your life post-high school? My claim is that without always realizing it, our brains are supercomputers that intuitively use math throughout each day to interact with the world around us. Therefore, math is relevant to your life post-high school. I have 3 warrants for this. 1, the problem-solving practices taught in fundamental math disciplines, such as algebra and geometry, are applicable to everyday tasks, such as making transactions, transportation, and cooking. 2, advanced math subjects taught in high school, such as calculus, help people better conceptualize the world around them. One example of this is when your brain uses derivatives to understand and react to traffic flowing around you. It may not use genuine derivatives of functions on paper, but it naturally understands the change in speed of objects and how to react. 3, if you never learned any math subjects, your brain would still instinctively interact with mathematically modeled interactions in the world. Therefore, learning the foundational subjects helps you better understand your surroundings and how to interact with them. As you can see, people use math to interact with their surroundings every day, and learning math improves your understanding of the world. We claim that math is relevant to life after high school. I hope you will agree as well.
Thank you, Alex. And now we will hear from the opposing side with Chanel. Chanel, you have 2 minutes and your time begins now.
Have you ever gone to the grocery store, looked at the price tag, and found yourself needing to solve for X? Have you ever sat at a stoplight and felt glad that you once had to find the square root of 124? Me neither. In this day and age, advanced math concepts like calculus and trigonometry, they don't serve us in our daily lives. In the rare event that we do need to calculate a percentage or multiply a fraction, our phones can do that for us. And we always have our phones with us. We are here today to discuss the idea that high school math is not relevant to life after high school, unless you're pursuing a STEM-related field. The U.S. school system should replace high school math classes with more life skills classes, and advanced math, save that for the college students who are pursuing math-related fields, which most of the times do require degrees. The reasons for this are, 1, students deserve more value for their time. So replacing high school math classes with survival skills like cooking, first aid, negotiation, mental health strategies, fostering good relationships, students would see more tangible results and a difference in their lives. Their time is valuable, and we need to give them the most for their time. 2, it would reduce the amount of stress and anxiety that students feel around their academic abilities. Students around the country are struggling and failing math classes that won't even serve a purpose after they graduate. Stress causes depression, low self-esteem, and a lot of other issues. And for what? Because a student can't remember the formula for an isosceles triangle? 3, if we don't act now, we're going to have more students growing up in a generation who can solve for X, but don't know the value of growing their own food or how to do laundry. Filling their brain space with information that's not going to help them perpetuates a crippled generation unprepared for the real world. We could put it on the parents, but are these the same busy parents who most don't have the time to help them with their homework and projects? There are many parents who don't have time to teach cooking and sewing either. School is for education, so let's educate them in ways that benefit them. As you can see, life skills trump high school math, and it's better that we let them learn skills that are going to help them in life. So we claim that high school math is not relevant after high school. I hope you will vote yes on this issue.
Perfect. Okay, and then again, we'll hear from the side arguing for the resolution with Emily. And Emily, you have 2 minutes. Your time begins now.
Hello, my name is Emily Weaver, and I speak today in support of the claim that the math that we learn in high school has relevant applications to life post-graduation. I speak as a high school English teacher and someone who deeply struggled in every single one of my high school math courses. Now, I believe that our current state of education in this country is at best middling, and I believe that the way we currently group students together is flawed, and I question the universal sequence of mathematics courses. All of this is true. I also believe that algebraic and geometric concepts are 100% a part of my daily life, both professionally and personally. And for that reason, I believe that if I must stand on one side of a broad stroke statement, I have no choice but to stand in support of high school math's relevance. Now, do I believe it was necessary for me to take trigonometry? No. I even opted out of calculus in lieu of a business math course my senior year. But do I use algebraic concepts when I cook, compare costs while shopping, and budget my finances? Yes. Do I use the broader framework of geometry when hanging a painting or draw up plans for my garden? Yes. As a teacher, I believe that exposure to all subjects opens up pathways to parts of our brain that retain conceptual frameworks for reading, writing, and mathematics. And even if we never again revisit things like the Pythagorean theorem or the square root of pi, neither of which I remember, I do believe that the conceptual framework that I utilize in my everyday life is entirely because of the consistent exposure that I had in my schooling.
Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, we will hear from the opposing side one more time with Megan. Megan, you have 2 minutes and your time begins now.
Was the math you learned in high school relevant to your current life today? I want you to think back, really think back to high school. It was a time of awkwardness, dances, sports teams, and boring classes. And for me, the worst classes of all were in math. Think about your math classes. Do you remember them? What did you learn? Have you used any of the math you learned then in your life now? Most American teens take the so-called geometry sandwich of math courses. Algebra 1, followed by geometry, and finally Algebra 2. Add in pre-cal or calculus courses, and you have an entire meal of useless math classes. I believe that the math courses we were forced to take in high school have not been relevant in my life today. As a reading teacher and graduate student, I have had zero need for the quadratic formulas I memorized or the trigonometry I had to learn. Unless you're going into a math or science-oriented field, the math we learned in high school is not relevant in the future. These are my 3 warrants why math in high school has not been relevant in my life post-school. 1, the required courses in high school math, specifically in California, where I'm based, include Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, and another higher level math course. Students are also pushed to include a 4th year of math classes to pad their college transcripts. These classes may include pre-cal, calculus, or stats. And while these courses may be beneficial to careers in the STEM fields, they are not particularly useful to anyone outside of these fields. Knowing high school level geometry has not been useful to me in the 10 plus years since I learned SOHCAHTOA, although I can still remember the acronym. 2, I'm not arguing that math is not useful or beneficial, nor that the current high school math courses are not helpful for those entering specific math-oriented career fields. However, there should be other math courses offered to those who want to take them, concepts that could be more beneficial or helpful to a wider range of students. For example, taking courses in finances, budgeting money, learning how to look at interest rates, percentages, debt, etc. I would have much preferred taking courses that could help me in life post high school on a realistic basis over courses I've not used any concepts from. And 3, my final warrant is that the current high school math classes can have a damaging effect on a student's sense of self-worth, lower GPA, and may be a time commitment affecting students' ability to do other extracurriculars. This is all for classes students may never use again. And this is why math is not helpful post-graduate life.
All right. Thank all 4 of you. Wow, you gave us a lot to think about already. I hope our listeners are ready for this. It's going to be a rich discussion here. I love that we're already addressing like what types of topics we cover in high school math and the effects like mentally, how the brain works, problem solving, but also like the stress that we're causing mentally on students. And so I just want to start by asking everyone, just your thinking back to your high school experience. Did you enjoy math class, like the way it was taught, or did it cause more stress than joy for you? And can we just start with like Emily and Alex?
Sure, I'll go. High school math was very, very stressful for me. I did not enjoy my math courses. There was probably one class that two classes that I liked. I liked my trigonometry course just because my teacher was fabulous and she taught from a like multiple intelligence model. So she made me feel valued at the very beginning of the class, even though I was entering as a pretty anxious math student. And then I had, like I said in my opening statement, a business math course. So I didn't have to take calculus my senior year. And there I was able to learn how to balance a checkbook and avoid credit card debt and things like that. So that was a math class that I really liked, but for the most part, I was pretty anxious about math class.
Alex?
Yeah, my experiences varied throughout high school. I started in, I think, what was called a college prep algebra class, and I did not enjoy it very much. And then I think I was able to do well enough in that to take like an honors geometry or trigonometry course, and struggled in that one too. And then convinced arguably the most challenging teacher at the school that I should be allowed to take AP calculus. And I'll never forget his name. It was Mr. McGoldrick. And he pushed all of his students harder than anyone else at the school. But he was so passionate about math and teaching that everyone enjoyed being in that class. And I mean, we all worked together on the homework. So I can say that because I experienced, trying to work on his very challenging homework problems with everyone else in the class. We would have group study sessions, and the classes where teachers are passionate are classes that I feel that I learn better in and I enjoy more. So, and I when from listening to Chanel and Megan's in opening statements, I can relate to that a lot, that oftentimes your sense of self-worth is impacted when your grades are poor, but I think that's also a huge reflection on the teacher and not taking time to care for each student. So I want to say I relate to that a lot because that definitely happened to me in my early math courses.
I think it's great to hear that your side is, both of you were arguing for that math is relevant, but you both had some negative experiences in high school. And let me jump to the other side then with Chanel and Megan. So what did you enjoy, or how enjoyable at times was high school math, or how stressful was it?
I would have to say that I do know how to separate the two concepts, the teacher from the subject. So I believe my teachers did the best that they could to teach math to us and to try to make it relevant and make it very much easy for us to learn. They did try, but at the end of the day, I still found it as very time consuming. I remember I was one of those students who went to all the extra services before school tutoring, after school tutoring, night school, anything that they could try to, use to help us. I was at those services. And I just remember, just doing enough just to try to pass the class. But at the end of the day, it felt very time consuming because, the teachers always said, you're going to use this in real life. And I waited for that opportunity. I waited like, okay, am I going to use this at the store? Am I going to use this at my first summer job when I was 15? I waited for opportunities to see this manifest in my life, and I didn't see those math concepts. So I'd have to say that it was very time consuming, and it just was not a positive experience for that.
And Megan?
Yeah, I think I kind of had both. I started off freshman year taking geometry, and I absolutely hated it. I had a teacher that did not care. And basically when you asked him, for help, it was figure it out yourself. Ask, the people around you. I'm basically just here to collect a paycheck. So I do think that, having high quality teachers who care about their students and want their students to succeed does make a big difference. But on the other side of the coin, have I used geometry since ninth grade? I'm gonna go with no. I'm not in construction, I'm not building, I'm not using SOHCAHTOA. I can remember it, but like I'm not using it. But then, on the other side, I took AP Stats my senior year and I loved it. I loved the teacher, and I'm using, concepts I learned then to this day. So I can definitely see both sides.
Yeah, I'm hearing a common theme from all four of you. Just like your positive experiences were because of a positive teacher, a really, really great experience there, and not like the content was like, this is why I want to do math class. Interesting. I'll pass it over to my partner here, Rob.
I'm going to go with something for Alex and Emily. In your current positions that that you're employed in, like what high school math topics are relevant to your current position?
So I'm currently in the throes of Calc 3, linear algebra, differential equations, and then a few more advanced concepts for linear systems analysis. But that's all because of my graduate school curriculum. And I'm very much struggling, but I have some teachers that I enjoy going to for help, and that's helping me. And some classmates of mine are helping me as well. But it's interesting. The more challenging the math subject gets, the more relevant it becomes to solving a real world problem. But that's not to say that the basic concepts are less relevant. I am just seeing over time that if there's more letters than numbers in an equation, it's for a good reason.
I would say for me, as a teacher, I think that I use a lot of the algebraic framework or the algebraic concepts, specifically when it comes to things like, it could be the universal experience of teachers, no matter the subject, of like grading and figuring out how to scale tests in favor of the student. But it also could be subject specific. So for example, like trying to figure out how to collect data, how to read data, especially since my subject area, or excuse me, my grade level is tested. So I have to pay attention to Lexile level, which for anyone who's not an English teacher, that's essentially the reading level that all students are at, and trying to figure out like what's an appropriate goal, an end of year goal or mid-year goal for that student to grow in terms of their Lexile level. So I think that in terms of like those algebraic concepts, working with data, manipulating data, I find that I do use it frequently in my profession as an English teacher.
And Megan and Chanel, kind of the same question, but maybe not necessarily high school math. I'm just curious, like what math concepts like you use in your current professions?
So yeah, I would definitely say that, my expertise is more towards helping educators. And so I work with educators in the sense of helping them transition out of the field. So I work with a lot of resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interview skills, and all of that really is more interpersonal and people skills. There's not really a whole lot of math related in my profession at the moment, except in the area of pricing and invoices and billing. So, but that's pretty cut and dry. I send an invoice, they know how to pay it, they send it back. I calculate prices depending on the service, how to mix and match for what they're looking for, because not all teachers want the same service. So that's about the extent that I deal with mathematics concepts. But no, my profession is solely, people to people, interpersonal skills and very just person to person interaction.
Megan?
Yeah, so as a reading teacher, I'm looking a lot at data. I'm testing kids multiple times throughout the year, every couple of weeks, if they're working with small group students and intervention group students. So I have to look at, specific kind of data points and see, are they improving? If I use this type of program versus this lesson, are they getting better? That kind of thing. So I do use that. So I would say, my AP Stats course in high school was helpful in terms of being able to look at percentages and calculate percentage based off data points and looking at graphing and, that kind of concepts are definitely helpful. And then even as a grad student, I'm currently working on my thesis. I'm looking at how ed tech programs are being utilized within classroom settings and if they actually do help student success. So same kind of idea. I am looking at data using stats and those kinds of math concepts. So I do use them occasionally.
And so we're hearing a theme about like data being used a bit. And I think I hear a lot of teachers talk about they wish there was more stats and data like relevant to the real world in high school math. And until AP stats, it's sometimes not there in some curriculum. And I think it was Chanel, you brought up that you kind of wish like higher level math, like calculus and stuff, was like saved for college, like if you're when you're at the point where you want to major in STEM. And so there's so much stuff we as math teachers think about that we have to like cover, whatever that means, in the 4 years of high school, and all these topics that are crammed in there, the algebra sandwich, the pre-calc, the trig, all that stuff. And you talked about how SOHCAHTOA maybe is not that relevant, but data is. I'm just wondering, and let me start with Chanel and Megan here, like if you had a magic wand and you could just redo high school math, what things are like important that you would keep, or what would you throw in there and add or change? Like, can we in a very general sense, at least, what are some quick things you might do as some major changes?
I would say one word: taxes. Taxes, because that is so relevant. It's going to be relevant, especially if you choose the entrepreneurial route, like I am, like the business professional. Every transaction you have to calculate, what are the taxes, the state taxes, W-2s, W-9s, that kind of thing. So I really wish that, they taught us more about taxes, so that regardless of what route you take, whether it's you choose to work for someone else or work for yourself, you need to know how to calculate the funds so that, you can be correct with the IRS. You need to know what to put aside for taxes. You need to know what you owe in taxes. So I think that's such a relevant life skill to have. Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree with Chanel. And I think even Emily brought up a point that she took a business math class and how beneficial and useful that was to her. And personally, I wish that I had that course offered to me, because I think life post high school, the first stop a lot of people make is going into college and student loans, and being able to read those documents and look at interest rates. And okay, if I'm taking out this much, how much am I going to have to owe when I'm done in 4 years? And we're not taught any of that, and especially if you are a first generation student who have had no background in this, you don't have parents who can help you look at those kinds of documents and look at interest rates and be able to calculate, exactly how much I'm going to owe in 4 years. I think things like that are helpful and useful. Like I said, the AP Stats course I took, it has been beneficial since high school. And I would even argue that, basic algebra classes are helpful in terms of getting students to be able to think at a deeper level, and looking at unknowns and trying to, calculate those kinds of things. I think that could be relevant. So if I had a, magic wand, maybe just make it more relevant to life on a general basis in terms of besides being just, specifics.
And just quickly, Emily and Alex, anything that you would do with a magic wand that you would change in high school math?
I mean, a lot. I think the things that are coming to mind, and I think Chanel and Megan both really answered this beautifully. I think that it all starts with funding. So I think if we start funding education appropriately, federally and at the state level, that could, I think, cause a lot of things to move. But I think that offering a more diverse selection of courses for students to make a more diverse amount of a more diverse pathway network. So it's not just, workforce and college, because there's a lot of variety and diversity within those two pathways as well, and they branch off into many other directions. But I guess diversify course selection, as well as, bring in a lot of those real life application courses to the forefront of the curriculum. So why a business math or personal finance class is not a required course before they graduate is beyond me. I think it's becoming more and more common in certain school districts, at least in my state or my area. But I know that that's not the case. And that wasn't the case when we were in high school.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far, and just want to emphasize that I think funding is incredibly important, and paying teachers such that they are passionate, or that you can be selective about the type and quality of teachers that you expect. I think that's incredibly important. Resources for students across all schools, incredibly important. If I had my magic wand for content, I agree with all of the life skills, but then more so, I think application examples in classical subjects like algebra and geometry. A very simple one would be if you're cooking dinner and making 3 different elements to the dinner and want them all to be warm when the last one is done, you have to start them at different times, spend different times prepping each ingredient. And I think Chanel mentioned, I haven't solved for X. Well, the way I conceptualize it is that your brain is solving for X, whether you realize it or not. And, the word problems, the classical word problems of Bobby has 5 apples and Joey has 3, take one away, whatever. It's like, well, those are lost more often than not once you get into the higher level high school subjects. And I don't think they should be. I think if you can see a real world application of something that your brain does, whether you think it is or not, I think it would be really helpful.
And I think Chanel kind of alluded to this earlier that textbooks don't do high school math any favors. So, but I am curious, and I'm going to send this to Megan and Chanel. So, as teachers, especially like high school math teachers, we don't always know the students' future paths. So, should we limit them if we are like teach them less of the algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and even that order is debatable, but are we limiting them if we don't really know what their future paths are?
That's a very good question. It's almost like, can you really predict the path that a child is going to go on? And should you be withholding information if you're not really sure? And that's a good question. One way to look at that is that it's actually not limiting them. It's more like let the college professors handle it. If they are looking to go into a STEM related field, they're more than likely going to need a degree for that. So they're already going down that track. So when they get to ninth grade, I'm sorry, not ninth grade, when they go to freshman year of college, sophomore year, they're likely already taking repeats that they took in high school anyway. It's called prerequisites. So they would already be doing repeats of that anyway. So I would say let the first place they learn that be in the college years. That way they're already starting fresh in their mind. They now can associate relevancy with that because they know they're going to a math related field. And then those who are not going to go into that, you wouldn't be limiting to them because they were not going to choose that field anyway. Because the ones who want to learn it, they would be in college wanting to learn it. And if not, they would choose a non-STEM route. So it's not really limiting. It's more about being strategic. And the strategy is to let them learn that when it's going to have value to them.
And to kind of add on with what Chanel would say is, I wouldn't say limiting. I would say you're opening up more options by providing these classes. I'm not even arguing that you should take away these, geometry, algebra, pre-cal, calculus. Let those classes be there for the ones that want to take them. I went to a extremely heavy science and engineering college. All of my roommates were engineers, and I was the one political science lone out that, had no idea what they were talking about when they would, calculate all these different weird things all the time. But they found math, pre-cal, calculus extremely beneficial in high school. But they did have to retake it again in college, so I wouldn't say you're limiting them. I would say you're opening up more options for the students that don't have that mentality or don't have that want to do that in college.
And for Emily and Alex, so, another question that has been circulating around is around calculus. Is calculus something that belongs in high school mathematics and like we are pushing to that? Or is that something like Chanel said should maybe be reserved more for the college field, and kind of like what your two experiences are?
So for me, I took effectively what was Calc 1 and Calc 2, a little bit of Calc 2, an introduction to Calc 2 in high school. And then I took Calc 1, 2, and 3 back-to-back semesters to start off my college experience. So she's spot on with the fact that you end up repeating a lot of that. What it did for me was solidify those concepts so that I could build a really good foundation for ultimately studying electrical engineering. So I am happy that I took them twice. My concern with what Chanel was saying is that you would need to convince the admissions councils to lessen how stringent the requirements are. And then, I think this is a whole other concept, but I think the SATs and ACTs need to be reworked as well. But then the content on those that largely determine admissions decisions would need to be reworked as well. So in a perfect world, yes, I absolutely agree that we should be changing to a more life skills focused subjects. But I would fall on the opposite side of the issue that if you exclusively teach life skills courses that students that should be given the potential to go into STEM fields would not have the prerequisites to get college admission?
For me, I never took a calc class. So I never took one in high school. I never took one in college. I had a very honest conversation with my guidance counselor my junior year, and I was like, "Listen, Phyllis, shout out to Phyllis Sieber." I was like, "Phyllis, I just simply cannot take a calculus class." And she said, "You know what? I think you're right. Let's teach you how to balance a checkbook, girl." And so I think that, I think calculus should be an option. I know that, I had many friends who went into STEM fields or, medicine who needed that for their placement exams to get into their college programs. I did not need that for my college entrance exam. However, I also failed my college entrance exam 4 times. So I had to take a remedial math course my freshman year of college. Just because, math is just not something that I'm particularly good in. And so in terms of calculus, I think it should stay as an option and a recommended class, if not a required class for those who have like very specific pathways. But I think I'm living proof that you don't necessarily need to take a calculus class in high school.
I have a quick kind of brain science question, which you're not all brain science experts, so don't stress about this, but I just want to know your thoughts on this. I think some math teachers would argue that like the math they're teaching is really helping just improve your brain. And I think like Alex or Emily somewhere in your opening statement said something along these lines of you're like becoming better problem solvers in general, even though you won't remember the quadratic formula or SOHCAHTOA, you're a better problem solver, you're a better reasoner like through things, even though you're not solving for X directly. I'm just wondering your thoughts on that. Like, is it important that we're doing some of these things, even though they might not specifically show up in the future? Do you think it has some relevance on the way your brain is working, like on some subconscious level, maybe?
I would say yes, and I don't think I need to belabor that point because I think a lot of what I've said up to this point has indicated that. But yes.
Yeah, maybe the other side then. Any thoughts on that?
That is a possibility. When you structure it that way, I think that makes a good point that it could be indirectly working in the background, like in the front, on the forefront, okay, you're not really solving for X, but in the way you handle your situations, make decisions, interpret things, that those could be math concepts working in the background. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I also agree that, it could be just, developing this higher level thinking patterns in your brain and working different areas that you might not necessarily be doing with other subject areas. So I could see the benefits of that.
It's interesting because in the last 10 plus years with the Common Core standards of math, they brought in these things called the standards of mathematical practice. And with the standards of mathematical practice, there's 8 of them. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's things like making sense of a problem, persevering in solving it, reasoning abstractly and quantitatively, construct viable argument, critique reasoning of others, modeling, using appropriate tools strategically, things like that. So it's not always just like the content anymore. They're now like having us talk about these standards of mathematical practice. Of the ones that I kind of mentioned, this is kind of for everybody. Do any of those kind of resonate with you or stand out more than others that you actually do in your field? And I can start with Emily and Alex first, and then I'll go to Chanel and Megan.
Do you mind if I actually ask a question before we get into that? Is there anyone of the 4 of us that learned Common Core math before graduating high school? Because I did not.
They had that in my high school. Kentucky is a huge Common Core state.
Yeah, I think towards the tail end of my high school career, California started implementing Common Core. So we got kind of, the basics of it, but it wasn't as Common Core heavy as it is now.
And to your point, Alex, things have definitely changed. Since many of us were in school, definitely when Chris was in school. So of those like standards of mathematical practice that are kind of like the new push and things that math teachers are currently experiencing, as well as just like the specific content, do any of those resonate more with you that like, oh yeah, I do that actually pretty often in my field?
I would say absolutely. I hear a lot about Common Core math, and at first I had an adverse reaction to it, but after learning a little bit more about it from Chris and others, I think emphasizing problem solving rather than rote memorization is the idea behind Common Core math. And I love that because it's applicable to everyday life. And the little bit of examples of real world that Emily or Chanel or Megan have brought up emphasize that they're not using SOHCAHTOA, they're problem solving. And so learning those techniques are really beneficial.
I agree with Alex. I think that, when I think back on my experience in high school, it wasn't until that trigonometry class that I took, now that I think about it, that I was shown anything except the literal application of the literal, like, formulaic experience. So I only saw a literal application of it. I didn't see any conceptual application. And even beyond that, I didn't see the way in which you can have a semi-literal application in a real world setting. And no, I didn't feel that my experience was, problem solving skills emphasis. And I think that would have potentially changed the game. I see a lot of students thriving in my school district in math class. So I think that there's a lot to be said for using Common Core math.
And for Megan and Chanel, kind of the same question. And also, this is not like a full endorsement of Common Core math. This is just talking about the standards of mathematical practice specifically. So Chanel and Megan, what, for you?
I would have to say it has its elements. It has its transferable qualities, when you need to show something, prove something, make a viable argument, constructing, because it really all it does, it's helping you decompartmentalize different parts of your brain to have different types of results. And that can be transferred to other things, including, the profession I have, because I find myself always decompartmentalizing, constructing viable options, doing all of those different things to be able to appeal and to serve the clientele that I have. So yes, it has its transferable traits.
Yeah, and to kind of go along with that, I would definitely say problem solving is one thing, I think all of us can agree that we're doing constantly every day, in all areas of life. And one thing I will say, not to push for, great Common Core, because it has its faults as well. But one thing I have noticed as a teacher in a classroom with students is how now math concepts, students are being taught how to do things in so many different ways. Whereas, I think at least when I was in school, it was memorization. Memorize your times tables, memorize the formula. You have to know it, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? Over and over and over again. And now, being in a classroom, currently I'm a reading teacher, but I actually substitute taught for, 5 years, and I was in classes TK through 12th grade. So I kind of got to see everything. And they're being taught so many different new methods on how to solve problems. And the big push now is, telling kids, hey, if one way doesn't work for you, find a way that does work, and that was something that, if I was told that as a student, I think that might have changed my perspective on math. Because like I said, and, when math was controversial to me, that really started because, I got points docked off because I didn't solve the problem the way that I was taught to solve the problem. Even though I got the right answer, they're like, well, you didn't do it the way that I wanted you to do it. And I think that kind of turns a lot of people off of math because you're looking at it and you're like, well, I got the problem right. What if I got from, A to B, who cares how I got there if I got the right answer? So I think now that push has changed where we're teaching kids, hey, find a method that works well for you. So I think that kind of goes along with that idea of, problem solving, finding different ways to solve, the problem and get the right answer, no matter how you would do that way.
And let me build off that. And just, I think it'll be our last question. Because this is a podcast for teachers, what advice would each of you have for the teachers out there teaching these math courses? Like, think like an Algebra 2 teaching, the quadratic formula, or teaching, like SOHCAHTOA stuff you mentioned in trig, the things that you say you don't use in your daily life, which is, it's fine. What advice would you have for them of how to make the experience great for their current students and make it maybe possibly relevant for their future or for their brain or whatever that means? I'll let anyone jump in whenever you're ready.
I would say that in my background is K through 5. And so whenever I give advice, I always come from the perspective of what I would have wanted someone to tell me. So when I was teaching those subjects and, going through, now I'm a little bit different because I'm not high school math. I was K through 5. So that's the that's the more relevant math, but that's another topic. But I would want someone to say, continue and try your hardest to find real world applications, because they do kind of touch on that, when they're talking to teachers, but they don't really drive it home. Because if you can't find a real world life application, it's not really going to make sense for the students. So I would say, do whatever you can, get mentored from other teachers, do some research, but whatever you're going to teach those students, make sure that there is a real world application so that when you tell your students you're going to use this in real life, you can be factual about it.
Absolutely. I would say be passionate about your material, meet your students where they are, and come up with real world examples for the material, not BS ones.
Yeah, definitely going off of what Chanel and Alex said, I completely agree. Make it relevant to students, make it interesting, show them how you would actually use this outside of school, in some capacity, be honest with them. And then, like I said, I think just showing them that there are multiple different ways on how to solve problems, and encourage them to find what works best for them, and not what's necessarily standard, but what makes sense in their brain, and just keep encouraging your students that math can be fun, it can be enjoyable. And I think something that I learned through my teaching classes is that we have this idea, oh, I'm not a math person. And that's something I told myself my entire life. I'm just not a math person. I'm strong in reading, I'm strong in writing, I'm not a math person. And I think that limited myself in what I did on a lot of different things. So I think encouraging your students and telling them everybody can be a math person is one of the big things that I would say.
I think everyone spoke really beautifully on answering this question. I think that if I had anything to add, it would be two things. I think the one comes from my experience with my trigonometry teacher. The activity that she did at the beginning, I think it's within the first week of school, she had this wall in the back of the classroom that had these all of these different intelligence areas. And she spent about a week trying to help take down the walls for all of her students, especially those who, like myself, like Megan, entered into the mathematic space feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of just feeling completely shut down. And I think that totally changed the game. It made me trust her. It made me feel hopeful. It made me challenge my conceptions that I had about myself. So I would say that was really successful for me as a student. I think when I think about the things that I hear my colleagues doing in my school district, I know that finding ways to meaningfully connect to the culture of the school districts has a lot of impact. So I work in a school district with a high concentration of rural poverty. So I think, I know that my colleagues find ways to meaningfully connect what we're doing in class or what they're doing in class to the actual lives of the students within the school district. And I think it shows in the success that I see amongst all of the students that I advise, the students that are in my classes, in my English class. So I think those are the two things I would say.
Thank you all, and I think that will conclude our questioning round. We will now end by giving each side 2 minutes to make their final arguments to you.
And we will first begin with Alex and Emily.
So first, we'd like to emphasize that we've reached a tremendous amount of common ground with our quote unquote opponents, but now friends, Megan and Chanel. And I'd like to say that I agree completely that an emphasis on life skills based math for high school students is tremendously important. And rather than focus only on classical math subjects, I think high school math teachers should emphasize math as a problem solving skill. And if that comes in a classical method like algebra or geometry or calculus, so be it. But if it comes in how do you do your taxes, problem solve through that, then so be it as well. So I want to acknowledge that an emphasis on math to improve problem solving is more important than math as a discipline to me.
Yeah, and just to sort of close out what Alex and I were saying, I think that we both wanted to recognize that there's so much nuance and variable that goes into which camp you reside in. And, that could be where you went to school, what your course offerings looked like in high school. And, whether or not when you hear that question, was high school math relevant to you? Are you thinking of a literal application, a conceptual application, so on and so forth? So I think that, it's a really interesting conversation to have, because there is so much nuance and there are so many variables that go into where we stand.
Nice. And with the final word, we have Chanel and Megan.
Yes. Well, while we do want to acknowledge that, yes, math does have an indirect effect on our lives, whether it's more of just thinking about it on higher level thinking, interpreting data, problem solving, we do see that in other facets of our lives. But in honor of the actual title of the debate, what we're talking about, we would like to tie it to a hypothetical scenario of the 80-20 rule. So 80%, 20%. We would definitely feel that 80% of what students should learn should be life skills. That should be the forefront. That should be the driving factor of their time in high school. But the backdrop with the 20% could definitely be math-related concepts. It just shouldn't outweigh the life skills.
And to kind of go off of what Chanel said, we discussed inclusivity. We're not saying take away algebra, geometry, trig, calculus. We're saying add to that, right? Give business management classes, finance classes, allow all students to thrive in high school, and not just those who have math brains or who are going into STEM fields. Really make high school math accessible to all. And that might change people's viewpoints on it. And it might even change their, future career paths.
And with that, thank you all. That concludes our debate. Wow, you've given us so much to think about. It is up to our listeners now to take a moment, ponder the arguments, and consider what resonated with you. And go to our Twitter at DebateMathPod to vote for which side you think was more convincing today.
We will leave the results up for 1 week and tally the results before our next episode.
And again, huge thanks to all four of your guests, our guests here. You are all so thoughtful, respectful. I love that we agreed on so many things together. We met in the middle. You have showed us that we can have different opinions, but all still get along.
And also, shout out to everybody listening. We hope you enjoyed and learned from this episode. Again, like Chris said, jump into the Twitter space and let's continue this conversation. Don't forget to vote.
And as we wrap up, Emily, where can listeners find you?
They can Instagram message me at my handle, which is at EAW1029.
Okay. And Alex?
Same thing. My Instagram handle is Alex_Hansen, HANSEN 17.
And Chanel, where can listeners find you?
They can find me in one of several places. I'll be living at my website, nellylovestorite.com. That's NELLY, the number 2, WRITE.com. I'm also on Instagram under the same handle at Nelly Loves to Write. Or you can find me on Facebook, Nelly Loves to Write LLC. And then again, that's NELLY, the number 2. Oh no, I forgot the loves. NELLYLOVES, the number 2, WRITE.
And Megan?
You can find me on Instagram at Miss M Learns, just the way it sounds.
Check out our show notes because we'll put all these in the show notes. That way people can find you as well.
Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list and get your first set of example debate activities you could use with your students today. Go to luzniak.com/podcast.
Don't forget to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com or follow us on Twitter at DebateMathPod and follow along with #DebateMathPod.
Rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us.
Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you more next episode. Until next time, cheers.